I posted a video last week going over one of Robert Cabral's Bound Angels videos, and that's where he goes into the shelter system with like one of his assistants, and he's demonstrating to these shelter employees how to quote train an aggressive dog. And in this case, it was a Rottweiler that they claimed was aggressive, and it seemed like maybe the point I was trying to make, maybe I didn't make it well enough. And the first thing I want to say is when I make videos like that, I'm trying to get you guys to think. If I pose questions, it's because I'm trying to point out the flaw in whatever's being done or said by the individual in the video, but I'm also trying to get you guys to think about these things. So if you've watched the majority of my videos, and I know there's a lot on there, these are questions that, as you expose yourself regularly to what it is I do and what I teach, you'll be able to answer these questions for yourselves. And that's my goal, is I want you guys to be able to answer these questions for yourselves. But for the sake of this video, I think it's worthy of giving an example of why this sort of thing is superficial. The system of reward and punishment it's not, you're not going deep enough, and you're not addressing things on the correct level, right? And this is why I make such a distinction on my channel. People call it semantics, but it's a valuable distinction to make, in my opinion. And that's that, because Robert talks about training. We're training this dog to not go after this other dog. But training would incorporate building skills in the dog, right? We're adding behaviors or skills to a dog's repertoire, a dog's base of knowledge, a dog's ability to do something specific. If I'm trying to get a dog to not do something or to stop doing something, I am now trying to remove a behavior from a dog's repertoire, as you might say. But this still doesn't go deep enough to me, because now we're looking at something like behavior in a very superficial way. And so, and you'll hear him talk about that in the video, where he's talking about, well, I need the dog, if the dog does this behavior, we give her a reward. And if the dog does this behavior, now Lewis, he's just like yanking on the leash. And that's his idea of applying a consequence. Now, to me, there's a big difference between a consequence and punishment. And if you're escalating the level of force that you need to utilize to get a dog to stop doing something, then that implies to me that you are trying to punish the dog. And that also implies to me that maybe your approach isn't that effective. And I've said before that the more you have to rely on force and tools to get a dog to do or not do something, then the level of influence that you possess is poor. Your ability to influence is poor. And your way of thinking, it needs some adjustment. So, but you'll also hear Robert talk about how, okay, well, because they're trying to get the dog, they're trying to make the dog sit. And then Robert says, well, if the dog gets out of that sit and goes after the other dog, well, the dog's not being punished for going after the dog. The dog's being punished for getting out of that sit. But the dog doesn't know the difference. The sit is meaningless, okay? This is the type of thinking you get lost in when you focus on behavior. Now, I teach my clients, you want a behavior and the state of mind, which is far more important than a behavior, to come into alignment. For instance, it's not good enough to me that a dog is sitting, because if that dog is still stalking or fixating on the other dog, then the state of mind is not where it should be. Furthermore, if a dog is standing and maybe even facing the other dog, but it is not fixating and it doesn't care about the other dog, then the state of mind is where it should be, and the behavior is also in alignment, because that dog is not making any forward advancements or showing the intent to move forward towards that dog, and that dog is also much calmer and more relaxed. It's not stalking and fixating the other dog, which would be a demonstration that its intent could be malicious. And even Lewis at the beginning, he acknowledges that the dog, the Rottweiler, is stalking the other dog or fixating on the other dog, but he does nothing to intervene at that moment. That would have been the correct moment to actually step in and address the dog. But you see the way he positions himself, he puts himself in a bad position. He's behind the dog and he's trying to yank on the leash behind the dog, and so it puts all this pressure on the dog's trachea and pulls it up off the ground. It would be far better to get in front of the dog and address it in a more authoritative and confrontational manner, where you can utilize something like eye contact, body language, your own posturing, your tone of voice, to get the dog to understand that, hey, I don't want you to fixate on this dog, and I also don't want you to move forward towards this dog, because the fixation is where it starts. We know that if the dog is already fixating on the other dog, then the dog's next course of action is going to be to move towards that dog. So if we get in front of it, we now prevent that from happening. Now, I want to give an example as to why this is superficial, right? Because we have to address things on a social level. The behavioral issues lie on a social level. It has nothing to do with training, right? So, and this is also a demonstration as to why this idea of reward and punishment is it's not, it's nowhere near the whole cake. You know, if we're baking a cake, there are multiple ingredients we need. Reward and punishment are just two of them. But it's not going to get you where you need to go. So imagine you meet somebody and you shake their hand, right? There's a lot happening in that social interaction, you just shaking somebody's hand. Now, I don't care if you're a man or a woman. If you shake another man's hand, you are studying that individual. Please correct me if I'm wrong. When you meet somebody and you shake their hand, you are judging how firm is that handshake. Is this person shaking my hand confidently, with power? Is this person looking me dead in my eye, acknowledging, you know, are they present with me? Or are they shaking my hand in a very weak way, a very soft way, and they're also having a hard time making eye contact with me? What's their posture like? Are they kind of slumped over and make themselves small? You're reading all of these things when you meet somebody. What's their tone of voice like? Because if that person comes across as a weak, soft individual who doesn't have the strength to present himself in a confident way, with all these different subtle cues, these social cues that we read, then it's going to what? It's going to shape the way you perceive that person in a particular way. Same as if you met somebody and they had a very firm, confident handshake, and they were looking at you, they were looking you in your eye in a strong, confident way, and they said hello to you in a strong, confident way, and they clearly present themselves as a very stable, confident individual, you're going to perceive that person much differently. This has nothing to do with reward and punishment. We are now focused on what is the interaction, what is all the little moving pieces to this interaction, what is happening on a social level here. That's how you need to view things when you are engaging with a dog, with an aggressive dog, any dog. But if I were in that shelter system, because someone had said, well, all they're trying to do is explain how to manage this dog's bad behavior. Well, if I were in that shelter with that particular dog and those people, I would have spent that 20 to 30 minutes very differently. I would have explained what's going on a social level. And what they did with that dog, really they got nothing accomplished to me, because the two dogs never actually interact. So how do you know you really solved anything? All you really did was you jerked on the leash, and you had to escalate the level of force to do that to get the dog to stop moving towards the other dog. But you saw every time they brought the pit bull near the Rottweiler still wanted to engage the same way, because they're not approaching this the right way. But eventually they put some space between the two dogs, and then the Rottweiler was like, fuck it, I'm done. And then they wanted to say that was a success, because now the Rottweiler is not moving towards the pit bull. Well, until the two dogs interact with each other, you have no idea if anything you did was effective. Because if this dog is aggressive, well, simply avoiding the problem isn't going to solve it. And yeah, management should be a stepping stone, a small part of the equation, but it's not the solution. You know, if you have an aggressive dog, management is a small part of the equation, but you should never rely on that to solve the problem, because you're never going to solve the problem trying to manage it, right? You will spend time avoiding the problem. But you should be working your way towards getting this dog to interact positively with other dogs and addressing the little things that need to be addressed on a social level as they come up. Right? But they're viewing this through the lens of reward and punishment. The dog shows this behavior, I give it a treat. The dog shows this behavior, I yank the leash. Can you name one relationship that you've built in your life where you view things in that way? Whether it's your significant other, a child, anything like that. I'll even use a child as an example. Let's say your child is engaging with another child in a way that you would not find acceptable. Well, there would be a big difference between you going up to that child, maybe kind of getting in their face a little bit and saying, "Hey, this is not okay," in a firm way, and then telling them how it is they should, or explaining to them why this is not okay and then telling them what the right thing to do is, versus going up angrily to that child and maybe pushing them and then they fall on the ground. Something like that. Something where that child may react. The child's not going to hear the message you're sending to it. The child may react in a negative way, because now you are coming at them in a way that they might deem as punishing. It might be over the top. It might be too much. The situation didn't call for that. What situation would call for that? No, you would address things differently. Because it's not about reward and punishment. It's about the social interaction. I'll go back to the handshake. You know, you shake somebody's hand, right? And they present themselves in a strong way, in a confident way. Maybe they're charismatic. You're now gonna have a level of respect for that individual because they made a very good first impression. If you met somebody and they presented themselves in a very weak way, a not confident way, a very socially awkward way, you're not going to have the same, you're not going to build any respect there on a social level. And something like respect, which is anytime I work with any dog, my goal is to build respect from that dog. That has nothing to do with reward and punishment. It has nothing to do with superficial behavior like, oh, the dog's sitting, staying, comes when it's called. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's all superficial. People are looking at this through the lens of, well, if the dog's sitting, then it's doing what I want. Well, no. It doesn't mean the dog respects you. It doesn't mean the dog perceives you the right way. And it doesn't mean, if given the opportunity, that dog's not going to engage in the way it wants just because it's sitting down. It has nothing to do with the state of the mind. It has nothing to do with the state of mind of the dog.